He built everything from the ground up, power, respect, and success that few could imagine. But when he walked into the very bank he owned, none of that seemed to matter. To the manager behind the counter, he wasn't a CEO. He was just another face they thought didn't belong. What happened inside those walls wasn't just humiliating. It exposed a truth far bigger than one man's story. A truth about power, prejudice, and the cost of being seen as less. The question is, how far would you go if the place you built turned against you? For years, he had carried himself with quiet pride. A man who rose from almost nothing, building a company that not only changed his life, but gave opportunities to others who had been overlooked. His days were filled with meetings, decisions, and the kind of responsibilities that come with success. Yet he never lost sight of who he was or where he came from. To the world outside, he was a CEO, a leader, a symbol of what hard work could achieve. On that particular afternoon, he wasn't walking into a boardroom or a corporate event. He was simply stepping into the bank he helped bring to life, a place that was supposed to represent safety, trust, and legacy. To him, it wasn't just another building. It was proof of everything he had endured to stand where he stood now. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh ink, the quiet hum of printers filling the background. He straightened his jacket, not out of vanity, but habit, the way any man prepared when handling important business. For him, this visit was routine, almost forgettable. But what he didn't know was that the same walls he believed reflected his accomplishments would soon echo with something very different. A moment that stripped away dignity, revealing how fragile respect could be when prejudice walked in the room. And with every step closer to that counter, the distance between who he was and how he was seen was about to collide. He approached the counter with the same calm confidence he carried into every deal, every negotiation. But the moment the manager's eyes landed on him, something shifted. The polite smile faded, replaced by a look that spoke louder than words. Suspicion, irritation, doubt. The kind of look he had seen before, the kind he thought success might one day erase. He asked to access an account, his account, tied directly to the very institution he had poured his resources and vision into. But instead of the smooth service expected of a client, let alone the owner, he was met with hesitation. The manager's tone grew sharp, clipped, as though each word was a barrier. Questions piled up, unnecessary, redundant, humiliating. Identification, proof, verification. Each request delivered not with professionalism, but with an edge that cut deep, as if the assumption was clear. He didn't belong here. Other customers began to glance over, some curious, some whispering. He could feel the heat of their stares pressing against him, as if the silent judgment of strangers had joined forces with the doubt behind the counter. The humiliation wasn't private. It was on display. His chest tightened, his jaw locked, but he remained composed. Years of enduring prejudice had taught him the cost of reacting too soon. But the questions kept coming, each one more absurd than the last. The manager leaned forward, voice louder now, drawing even more attention. It wasn't about protocol anymore. It was about power, about control, about putting him in his place. The man behind him shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. A woman clutched her purse a little tighter. Every movement in that lobby seemed to confirm the same message. You don't belong here. And then came the breaking point. The manager, with deliberate finality, refused the transaction altogether. He dismissed him as though he were a stranger attempting something deceitful. The words were cold, delivered with the weight of someone convinced they had the right to strip dignity away. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The air thickened, heavy with disbelief. Was this really happening? In his own bank, the place he built brick by brick, policy by policy? His hands tightened around the folder he carried, the very documents proving everything the manager questioned. But even proof wasn't enough when prejudice had already decided the outcome. He stood there, outwardly calm, but inside, a storm raged. Anger, hurt, a deep ache of betrayal. Yet beneath it all, there was something else, resolve. Because what the manager didn't know, what the onlookers couldn't yet see, was that this story was far from over. The humiliation was real, yes, but so was the truth. And when it surfaced, it would change everything. The only question was, who would fall when the truth came to light? The silence in the bank lobby was suffocating. All eyes were on him, the weight of suspicion pressing harder with every passing second. The manager's voice, now sharp and commanding, cut through the room as if he were dealing with a criminal rather than the very man who made this institution possible. Papers were shoved back toward him, the refusal final, the humiliation complete. But then, something shifted. A senior executive, alerted by the commotion, stepped out from a nearby office. He froze at the sight. The bank's founder and CEO being treated like an intruder in his own building. Shock registered on his face, quickly replaced by anger. The manager straightened, ready to defend his actions. But before he could speak, the truth landed like a thunderclap. The executive's voice rang out. "Do you even know who you're speaking to?" Gasps rippled through the room. Customers turned, whispering in disbelief. The man they had just watched being humiliated was not just another client. He was the owner, the architect of the very walls around them. The manager's face drained of color. His confidence faltered, the authority he had wielded moments ago crumbling into panic. His protests stumbled, excuses forming too late. The evidence of prejudice was already exposed, not in private, but in front of an entire crowd. And there, in that moment, the CEO didn't need to raise his voice. His silence carried more power than any argument. The weight of dignity reclaimed, the sting of injustice laid bare for all to see. The executive's verdict was swift. The same authority that had denied him service was stripped away in an instant. The manager's termination wasn't whispered behind closed doors. It was delivered on the spot in front of everyone who had witnessed the humiliation. Yet even as justice came swiftly, the damage lingered. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, faces marked with shame for the roles they played as silent witnesses. And the question hung in the air, heavier than the silence before. If this could happen to a man of power, what did it mean for those who had none? When the dust settled, the bank lobby slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Customers moving, papers shuffling, phones ringing. But for him, nothing about this day was routine. The sting of humiliation lingered, not because the manager had been fired, but because the experience had revealed a truth he had known all along. No amount of wealth, power, or accomplishment could shield him from the shadow of prejudice. Walking out of those doors, he carried more than the weight of his own dignity. He carried the story of countless others who had faced the same judgment without witnesses, without justice, without anyone to step in on their behalf. His story had an ending many would call fair. The manager was held accountable, his position and reputation stripped away. But the question burned deeper. What about the millions who never see justice at all? For every moment captured, countless others are erased, ignored, or dismissed. This wasn't just about one bank, one man, or one insult. It was about a system that still decides worth based not on character, but on skin. And while his silence in that moment spoke louder than words, silence in the world outside can no longer be enough. The lesson is clear. Power does not erase prejudice. Success does not guarantee safety. And if it can happen to someone at the very top, what chance does someone at the bottom truly have? So the question remains, when will we stop treating stories like this as exceptions and start seeing them as the reality that demands change? Because this wasn't just his story. It's ours. And until it ends differently for everyone, it hasn't ended at all.